Hello everyone, welcome to the Interpreting X and Y Intercepts notes. The good thing about getting farther into Algebra 1 is that yes, we focused first on what an X and Y intercept are, and that's what you just took your test on. However, it's important to also be able to interpret and understand what they mean in the context of a word problem. And so, as a brief review, remember that an X-intercept is always in the form a number, comma, 0. Because an X-intercept, again, is on the X-axis, and any point along this line does not go up or down, so the Y is 0. On the other hand, an X-intercept is always in the form 0, comma, a number Y, and that is because along the Y-axis, nothing ever moves left or right, which is why X is 0. So that's why these 2 points are in the format they are. And this formatting will help us with both of these problems. And the goal for the first one here, so again, these are 2 separate problems. The goal I'll call part A, the goal of this, is to figure out first what the X-intercept is from the graph and what the Y-intercept is from the graph. So let's start there. The X-intercept is where it crosses the X-axis. So as I scan, I notice that my graph crosses the X-axis right here, and we would label that point 25, comma, 0. And the Y-intercept would be down here on the Y-axis if I follow the green line at 0, negative 4. Now this isn't enough for interpretation. So let's go back to the graph and see what everything means. It looks like the X-axis is in terms of time in minutes, and the Y-axis is in terms of temperature in Fahrenheit. So that means if I'm thinking about everything in terms of a point, that my X values are minutes, because that's what the X-axis says, and my Y values are degrees in Fahrenheit. So if I looked at what the X-intercept actually means, the 25 is in the X position, which means it must have something to do with minutes. So if I were going to describe in words what's going on, I could say something like, after 25 minutes, where is the temperature? So after 25 minutes, the temperature seems to be at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So after 25 minutes, the temperature is at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So that sentence would describe what's going on with the X-intercept. My Y-intercept, on the other hand, starts with 0. So if my 0 is in the X position, that means I'm talking about 0 minutes. So we could say after 0 minutes, the temperature is negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. But the phrasing at 0 minutes is not as elegant as saying something like this, at the start. So instead of at 0 minutes, we could say at the start, the temperature is negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Next example, we can interpret X and Y intercepts also from a table. And so the first thing we'd want to do is scan the table to see if we can find what the intercepts are. And remember, the X-intercept is always in the form a number, comma, 0. And I see that right here in my table. So I'm going to make a note right now that the X-intercept is really at 12, comma, 0. The Y-intercept is always in the form 0, comma, a number. And I notice that this, as a point, would be considered 0, comma, number. And remember from graphing with tables, like you just did on your test, a table is always input, output, input, output. So this one, the Y-intercept, would be 0 in, negative 24 out. So again, if I were to interpret what's going on, in this problem, the X values represent time, so I'm going to write X, comma, Y again. The X values represent time in seconds, and the Y values represent depth in meters. So we're really dealing with a scuba diver's position in the water. So if my X-intercept is 12, 0, the 12 represents an X value, so we're dealing with seconds again. So we could start off in a similar way to the previous problem. We could say after 12 seconds, where is the scuba diver? So after 12 seconds, he is at 0 meters. So if you think about that a scuba diver should be underwater, if he's at 0 meters, that probably means he's no longer in the water, but he's directly on the surface of the water. So we could say after 12 minutes, the scuba diver is on the water's surface. You could say after 12 seconds, the scuba diver is a depth of 0 meters. That absolutely works. But again, I'm just being more specific about that he's probably on the water's surface. The y-intercept, this time the zero's in the x position. So again, like this example, we could say after 0 seconds, but instead of saying after 0 seconds, again, we could say at the start. Where is the scuba diver? Well, my meters is -24. So that means if the water's surface is 0, he must be 24 meters under the water's surface. So we could say at the start, the scuba diver is 24 meters below, and below represents the negative here, below the surface. So feel free to pause if you need to copy anything down. I'm going to keep going, but that's the nice thing about a video, that you can pause and rewatch whenever you need to. The next two examples are another graph and a chart. So what I'm going to ask you to do is please pause the video at this time, and I would like you to find what you think the x and y intercepts are in both cases. And if you'd like to try to interpret without me, please do. And then when you unpause, I will come back with my work. So please pause now. Okay, so I have some work here, and let me check in with you before I write my sentences down. For the first example here, I said that my x-intercept along my x-axis was at 6, 0, and I said that my y-intercept along the y-axis was at 0, 20. So please make sure you agree with these two before you keep going. Next, what I did was I came up here in green and I said that my x-axis represents time in seconds, so I labeled x everything to do with seconds, and y is represented as height in feet. So if you want to write this down, again, feel free to pause and do so. In terms of my sentences, what we're talking about is the descent of an eagle, or of an eagle landing. So it looks like the eagle is starting at a higher height and then eventually probably found food and is coming down to the ground to find it. And so my x-intercept represents 6 first, and 6 is in seconds. So we could say after 6 seconds, what is the eagle doing, or where is the eagle? So after 6 seconds, it looks like the height in feet is 0. So again, we could say after 6 seconds, the height is at 0 feet. But again, 0 feet means more to me like we're hitting the ground, or we found food on the ground. So the best answer probably would be after 6 seconds, the eagle lands on the ground. The y-intercept, this time, again, 0 represents time again in seconds. And so, again, we could say at 0 seconds, but I'm going to continue with the theme with at the start. So at the start, the eagle was where? So at the start, the eagle was 20 feet above the ground. Probably looking for prey. So there we've interpreted the x and y intercept in this example. In the example in the chart, we're dealing with Ava's distance away from home. So x represents minutes in time, and y represents the amount of distance in miles. So first, again, to check in, my x-intercept from the chart was number first comma 0, 8, 0, and my x-intercept was 0 first comma number, which was 0 comma 4. Again, as a memory trick, if you want to find the x-intercept, the number that you have should be in the x position and the 0 should be in the other. If you're trying to find the y-intercept, the number that you have should be in the y position and 0 should be in the other. So if I were to interpret my x-intercept, the 8 is x, so we're dealing with minutes. So after 8 minutes, Ava is, let's see, so after 8 minutes, her distance from home is 0 miles. So if her distance from home is 0 miles, that means she's actually at home. So after 8 minutes, Ava is home. Pretty quick, I have to say. If she's walking, she lives pretty close to school or wherever she really is going. Now on to the y-intercept. The x value is 0, so you could again say after 0 minutes, but we're talking about Ava's distance from home. So you could say at the start, but you could also say before she leaves, because you know she's going somewhere. So before Ava leaves, she is, looks like 0 comma 4, so she is 4 miles away from home. But again, you could say at the start, Ava is 4 miles away from home. That would also be acceptable. Last but not least, one more word problem, and then we're done with these notes here. An amusement park charges $50 for an admission before 6 p.m. and $20 for admission after 6. Pretty good deal, I'd say. On Saturday, the park took in a total of $20,000. For part A, write an equation that represents the number of admissions that may have been sold. Let X represent the admissions sold before 6 p.m. and let Y represent the admissions sold after 6 p.m. So for part A, if I'm writing an equation, I want you to notice that the 50 represents the amount of money per ticket before 6 p.m. And X also represents the number of tickets sold before 6 p.m. So if we wanted to start our equation, if we multiplied 50 times X, that would represent the amount of money we're making just before 6 p.m. So we could start with 50X plus $20 for admission after 6 p.m. I'm guessing they're trying to get a lot more people there in the evenings. So the problem told us to represent Y to be the admission sold after 6. So each ticket cost $20 times the number of tickets sold. And the problem also told us that in that time, they made about $20,000. So if we look at the equation, this one represents money plus more money equals the total money. So part A is done. We have found our equation. So moving on to part B, it does ask us to graph the equation, and we will get to that. But before we get to B, I would actually like to do part C first, because it asks me to find my x and y intercepts. And as you know, if it's in standard form, we should use that quote-unquote cover-up method I was talking about in class. So if I wanted to find the x-intercept with the cover-up method, if I want to find the x-intercept, this is 0, so it disappears. So you're left with 50x equals $20,000. And if I wanted to find the y-intercept, you're plugging in 0 here. So that would be 20y equals $20,000. If I keep solving both of these and divide by 50, I would get x equals 400 here. And if I divided by 20, I would get y equals 1,000 here. So if I wrote this as an intercept on the x-axis, this is the x value and 0 is the y value. On the y-axis, 1,000 is the y value because you're finding the y-intercept, and 0 is the x position. All right, so to come to class prepared on Monday, I would like you guys to do 2 things with this problem. I want you to remember that as a point, the x values all represent tickets sold before 6 p.m., and the y's represent tickets sold after 6 p.m. So I'd like you to write down in your own words what you think these intercepts mean in terms of the problem, And I also would like you to try to graph them based on your intercepts. And we'll definitely be checking that. So